Good evening, everyone. My name is Annette Insdorf. I'm Director of Undergraduate Film Studies at Columbia University, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to a special event in association with the Writers Guild of America East, co-sponsored by Barnard College and Columbia University's School of the Arts. Both campuses share Christina Kallas, and we are proud of the association. We're also grateful that she devised and organized tonight's event. She is a writer-producer for both film and television, an author, and an educator who has taught all over Europe, including the German Film and Television Academy in Berlin. And after 8 years as president of the Federation of Screenwriters in Europe, she was recently honored for her contribution to the international writers community. Professor Kallas will moderate the panel tonight, which will take approximately an hour, followed by Q&A with the audience, about a half hour. And at the end, there will be a small reception in this room behind those screens, thanks partly to Red Bull's sponsorship, while Christina will sign copies of her new just published book, Inside the Writer's Room, Conversations with American TV Writers. Just a note, you need to go back out into the lobby to purchase a copy of the book from the book culture representative, and then you bring it back in where Christina will be seated at that table and will sign copies dedicated individually to each of you. And now, please join me in welcoming Christina Kallas.
Thank you, Annette, and thank you all for joining us today. When I first came to New York 3 years ago, I was kindly invited by the Writers Guild of America East to come along to their meetings with writers' rooms in my role as president of the FSC. Now, the FSC, the Federation of Screenwriters in Europe, unites as a whole perhaps 9,000 screenwriters. But there is only a relatively small percentage of writers who actually write for a living. And they all more or less write feature films on deferred fees and write for a living for television. As one of them, I had personally just had the experience of being part for the first time ever of a writer's room for my second TV show back in Berlin, and it was literally imposed upon us by the network as the secret of success of American TV. It was supposed to be an exact copy of how an American writer's room works. Now, being in that writer's room, I somehow knew we weren't doing it right. And I was curious to find out what is the right way. So, to decipher the secret, if you want. So I grabbed the opportunity of looking into these sacred rooms of creation. The things that as a writer became quite evident to me right away, and that seemed to be game-changing. First, the real writers' rooms include only writers. Second, the writers are on set. Third, the writing is changeable till the very end by the writer. Now, I know this may all sound normal, but it's not. I wanted to know more. I wanted a close look into that writer's paradise, and I wanted to find out what absolute freedom, absolute creative freedom really means, and if it is real. To get answers, I decided to have conversations with writers in different stages of their personal trajectory. So I talked with showrunners, I talked with what we call number ones, so the next most important writer in the room besides the showrunner, with writer-directors, with staff writers, with writers come educators, with TV writers who were boldly transitioning to the newer form of web TV. And I went back to analyze these talks, to identify themes, to spot the differences and the similarities. And the result is this book. And I'm really grateful tonight to be able to have this conversation with three of the amazing writers in it. Each one of them has created work I deeply admire. Tom Fontana has written Sent Elsewhere, Homicide, Life on the Street, Oz. More recently, Borgia for Canal Plus and Netflix, shot for the biggest part in Prague, and Copper for BBC America. Terence Winter is being talked of a lot at the moment as the screenwriter of The Wolf of Wall Street, for which he is nominated for an Academy Award. But his home is TV, and the two shows that we identify him most for are The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. Eric Overmyer has written with Tom for Homicide, Live on the Street, and he has written, of course, what we love him most, or I love him most for, is The Wire and Treme. I will not even attempt listing their awards. They are too many. Please welcome Eric Overmyer, Terence Winter, and Tom Fontana. So this is Tom Fontana, this is Terry Winter, and this is Eric Overmyer. What I would like to do, among others in the course of this evening, is I'd like to read you my favorite quote from the book, and I would love your comment on it.
About each other's?
Yes. Is that not what we do in writers' rooms?
I was misquoted, whatever it is.
Exactly. Okay, I will start with Terry then. And you're talking about what makes a good writer, a writer you want in your writer's room. And you say, what's really important to me is a willingness to open up about yourself, about your past, about things that have embarrassed you, weird stuff about yourself. You have to open up your veins and spill it out in the writer's room, because that's the stuff that we tell stories about. That's part of our job as writers. One has to be willing to access that and then share it with everybody else and put it on TV. And if you're not willing to do this, then you're not helping me as the head writer, because that is what I need from you. I need you to bare your soul.
Right. Yeah, I only have a certain amount of insanity in my own well, and I need to hear everybody else's. I mean, that's part, when it's working well, you know, somebody will tell you, you know, if you're doing a drama, somebody will tell you, you know, a painful story about their childhood, or, you know, the weirdest, you know, encounter they ever had, or the weirdest relationship they've ever been in, and that's the stuff that gets turned into TV shows. That's why we write about it. You know, for me, it's almost essential. I mean, you know, there has to be ground rules too. I mean, this has got to be a very safe place. I mean, it's got to be, you know, like therapists are trained to not react to anything you tell them. If you say, you know, I've been, you know, having fantasies about my cat, you know, they go, oh, that's interesting. So I'm told. I imagine that's what a therapist would say. But it's got to be the same thing. You got to, you know, you can't pitch some story, say, you know, one time I did this really, you know, crazy thing. Like, you can't have the other writers go, oh my God, what a fucking idiot you are. It's got to be like, you know, okay, this is a safe place, and you've got to be able to share it, and, you know, and then ideally it's not supposed to leave the room, and of course you go home and tell your wife, like, you're not going to believe what Eric Overmyer told me today. But it's, you know, when it works, it's great, because that's, you know, I can't count how many things from my own life, and you guys could jump in and tell me if I'm sure it's happened to you too, where you go, that was right out of my life. That it's on screen. I mean, Tony Soprano getting hit in the head with a piece of London broil was me in 1980-something, you know, at the end of an argument with a girlfriend. And that was just a offhanded story I told, and David said, that's great, let's do it. You know, and next thing we knew, she was winding up, Annabelle Ciora was winding up with a piece of meat. So, and that's a minor example. There's a million other really in-depth.
I think the danger, though, is after you've been doing it a long, long time, and you've sort of used up all the trauma of your own life, you do have to rely on other people. But I find sometimes that I like go like, oh, I have to replenish the insanity just so I can get back to writing. And so that's the danger. At my age, I shouldn't be doing anything other than sitting in a wheelchair, but...
Well, I heard very different things about how, you know, you have very different definitions of a writer's room, the three of you, and you run your writer's rooms. I mean, actually, Tom, you made it very clear you are not running a writer's room. That's not something you like. Would you elaborate on that?
Well, only in the sense of that, in my experience, for the writers to get together every day to talk about the episodes as a group, there tends to be a lot of time spent not talking about the show. We talk about what happened last night, where we had dinner, and the fight we had, and the thing, and You know,
it's a perfect procrastination device.
I know, which for writers, that's what we live for, is procrastination.
Yeah.
But so what I've found over the years, for me at least, is that we meet, but we don't meet as a group very regularly. And I tend to meet one-on-one with the writers pretty extensively. But the idea of sitting down and breaking a season's worth of stories, it seems to me that I would rather sort of try to figure it out myself and then invite the other writers into the process, and then they contribute these huge amounts of original ideas that I could never come up with. But to sit down in a room with, like, okay, it's season 5. What are we going to do? I think you're inviting a lot of wasted time.
And when you throw the internet into that now, you go, did you see the monkey on roller skates? Pull that video up. You have a TV in there, you got to watch that. And then, and then somebody else, did you see this other one? And that's like a whole nother hour of procrastination. And, monkeys hadn't learned to ride roller skates in 1920, so we can't even use that on Boardwalk Empire. So it's a complete waste of time.
So you had an interesting mixture, Eric, of the two concepts. Like your writer's room doesn't meet every day.
Well, it's because Tom Fontana ruined me. My first job was for Tom, and there was no writer's room. He would just come into my office, or he'd say, Overmyer, get in here. And he'd say, put a hockey team in the emergency room. Go. I remember that, actually. And my first job was on St. Elsewhere. So
Wait,
that's...
I said put a hockey team in the...
No, you know what? You said make something happen in the emergency room.
Oh,
I
okay.
put the hockey team.
Okay.
But it worked, right?
That's one of the things you wouldn't have come up with.
Right.
That's exactly what.
So I kind of, and then I worked for Tom again on Homicide, and it was the process he's talking about. We'd get together and he'd say, do you have anything for episode 3? And I'd say,
Hockey team in the police station.
can we do the hockey team again? And he said, no, we did that at St. Elsewhere. So,
But it could be a baseball team.
So that's the Wire and Treme were sort of, we would meet periodically, but not every day. And then I've been on shows where you meet every day. And those rooms can be good or they can be not good, depending on who's in the room and what the proportion of procrastination to actual work is.
Right, yeah.
I think what it goes back to is what you were saying, which is you have to create an environment where everybody can expose themselves. I just think it should be like a big space where people can run in and out of each other's offices, as opposed to we're trapped in this room.
Well, that's the thing, too. If you don't have the right mix of people, if there's one person in that room who's not on board with it,
that's right.
the whole vibe of the room changes.
It's
And
like jury
and then,
duty all of a
and then
sudden,
suddenly it's like...
It's like group therapy, right?
You're being reluctant to pitch things. I actually remember on The Sopranos, we had a situation where a writer's assistant wanted to come into the room and be in the room with us. Normally, we wouldn't have the writer's assistant in the room till we were ready to actually dictate something. And I told some particularly graphic, horrible story that happened to me once. David Chase stopped me and said, let me ask you something. Would you have edited that story at all had the writer's assistant been sitting in here? And I said, yeah, probably. I would have pulled back a little bit. And he said, we can't have the writer's assistant in here. You can't start to get self-conscious about the stuff you want to talk about or put on the show, or even just areas you want to explore, and that was a really interesting lesson. So, and as much as people swear up and down, yeah, I'm not sensitive, or we can talk about anything, if it's not, and you sense it, the whole room gets thrown off.
Right. Well, I was wondering if it's the group makes it for sort of the edges to fall off, and you go to the lowest common denominator, or if actually the group is more courageous and is more courageous in breaking ground.
Depends on the group.
Both can happen,
I find it's funny. Eric and I were just talking before. We think the most effective room is a really small one, if you're going to have a room at all.
Absolutely.
Just a couple of people who are really in sync with each other, and you don't have to hear from everybody. So that's the other thing, too. People feel the need to justify their job. So even if somebody has nothing to say, they'll say something to make it look like, I'm pitching, I'm contributing, and it's easier to just be quiet.
Right.
Yeah, I think if it's the right room, and I've been in a couple of rooms that have been the right room, the ideas do, I think, get better as they bounce back and forth. And then if there's one person in the room who's not on the same wavelength, the topics can be diverted continuously.
Sure.
People who are sort of trained in free association and non sequitur will destroy you. So, in terms of a narrative.
Yes.
Yeah. Tom, why do you think it's so important for the writer to be on set?
Well, I think it's a two-part thing. One is, for me, a script is never done, and and once it's okay to have it in your head, and it's okay for everyone to read it, and it's okay to prep it, but until the actors actually are moving around a space, it really isn't alive yet. It doesn't exist yet, and so. I just think it's important for a writer to be there to help, because something as stupid and trivial as, oh, there's actually 6 steps to get up here as opposed to 3, so we need 2 lines more of dialogue because the director wants to carry the scene. That's a very practical thing. But also what happens is, I'll give you an example of something that happened on Borgia. We had written a scene where Cesare was meeting the woman he was, who Cesare Borgia married in real life, and but we did it where he didn't know it was her, and we had written this scene where he didn't know it was her, and it was a perfectly fine scene. We got on the set, and the actress who we cast for the part of Charlotte was so incredibly beautiful, and the idea was there's supposed to be all these maids, and you weren't supposed to tell which one was the princess. And anyway, she was so stunning, and they dressed her beautifully. I said, he would have to be an idiot not to see that she's the princess. So what we did was, and this was an experiment, I said, let's not change any of the dialogue. It's just that Mark Ryder, who plays Cesare, I said, just play it as find the moment that you realize it's her, and just now the dialogue becomes a game between the two people. And it ended up being an incredibly charming scene. Was never our intention, and there you had it. But it wouldn't have happened unless a writer was on the set, because I think everybody else is so respectful that they would go, oh no, this is the scene, and I would have seen the dailies and been like, you know. Sure. So that's the thing. The other thing is there is a certain amount of word police going on, where some actors are incredible at improvisation. And Richard Belzer, for example, you can write a scene for him, and then he finds little things. Not all actors are that gifted in that particular way, and yet they all want to believe that they are. So they'll go, well, I was playing with it and I changed this, and you go like, yeah, well, now it makes no sense whatsoever. So there's a little bit of word police going on as well.
So Terry, you had the experience. I mean, were you on the set of The Wolf of Wall Street?
I was not, only because I was doing Boardwalk at the same time. But that's a vastly different animal, and feature films generally the writer's not. Well, even though Martin Scorsese is extremely collaborative. I've done a few films where some of which I've been completely shut out of, and others like this one where it's been really. I think for the 6 weeks before we went into actual production on Wolf, I met with Marty and Leo every single day from 3 in the afternoon until 2 in the morning, just going through the script word for word. And then once production started, I had to go back to my day job. And in any event, there wasn't a lot to be done on the set, because the way Martin Scorsese does it, it's his ship. And that was interesting too. Even on the Boardwalk pilot, it was an interesting experience for me because it was my pilot, and yet once the ship sailed, there wasn't really a lot to do. I've told this story before. It was day 1 of the pilot, and we did a scene where Michael Pitt walked into a room full of women. The show's set in 1920, and he walks into a room full of women, and he has a hat on, and he doesn't take his hat off. So I watched one take, and I said, let me see what he does the next time, and he goes in, and he doesn't take his hat off again. Now, in 1920, a man instinctively would take his hat off in the presence of women. So I went up to the first AD, and I said, I have a note for Marty. How do I do this? And he said, I don't know. No one's ever given him a note before. And I said, oh, shit. Wow. I said, well, this is the day. He goes, well, he's in that room back there. It's like the longest walk of my life. And I came in, I was like real tentative, and he looks up and he said, what's the matter? I said, well, I'm so sorry. I said, just noticed something. He's like, so I told him. He went, oh my God, of course. Get Michael Vitt's hat. And then like 80 PAs are running, scurrying, running around. And he said, no, anything at all you see, please. I can't see everything at once. So come to me. So I really picked my battles, and I'd say like the third time after 2 weeks, I was coming, and he just lowered his glasses. He's like, yes, just one little thing. And then I said, let me just get out of here. But there was one night where I remember standing there. It was with me and Tim Van Patten, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and we were going to be shooting till 3 in the morning. And I said, there's nothing for us to do here. This is Martin Scorsese's set. There's nothing for us to do. Let's go. And we went out to eat, and came back, and once the pilot was done, then that we took over the show as it would traditionally be taken over by the showrunner, and then it was our set and stuff. But that was a very odd experience. Normally it would be the showrunner, there and completely in charge.
Do you think it makes a difference, Eric, in terms of the subtlety that you can allow your screenplay to have, because you're on a set and that you don't have to write every little word because you're going to be there?
Oh, I wouldn't trust that.
Okay.
I'd want to finish it as close as I could. And then I suppose there's some consolation in the fact that you get a couple more cracks at it. On set and also in post, you get a chance to mend some mistakes.
Right, yes, because
Yeah.
you see it with the actors.
You go,
which is something
well, and you see that you overwrote a scene, and
on its
this
face.
line can come out and that line can come out, and it'd be better if you lost this, or the director didn't stage it properly and it's not working the way it was supposed to work, and you have to fix it some way. So that's a good thing about film, that it's a little bit more malleable that way.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the writing, you want to, I think you would want to finish it as much as you can before it goes to set.
Right. So here's my favorite quote from Tom. Now, you say, I think it's essential for us writers to write what is important to us, what touches us, what makes us laugh, and try not to please everybody else. And that isn't to say you don't want to please everybody else. I want everyone to love everything I've ever written. But I think people look to being successful as opposed to being faithful. And when I say faithful, I mean faithful to themselves and to the truth within them. And I think it's very easy for that to get lost in the need to be successful, in the, oh, I want the trophies, I want the money, I want the car, I want the house way. And I only say that having been seduced by that, and then having woken up and said, well, wait a minute, is that really what I wanted out of being a writer? So I probably could have had a more successful career, because there were several times when I chose to not do what was commercially the wisest choice. I feel like I have been faithful, and therefore, because I have been continually faithful to the writing, I don't feel the need to be successful in my career. Now, Tom, we really can't imagine how it would. We really can't imagine how it would be if you were successful in your career. Of course, the more people you're trying to please, the more edges fall off. So, can you remember, what did you want out of becoming a writer?
Well, way, way, way back, I knew I had to do this thing, this writing thing, and I knew I had to do it every day. And for a long time, I would do it every day and have to do really crappy jobs in order to be able to get up and write every morning. And I remember at one point just thinking, man, wouldn't it be great if somebody paid me to be a writer, to write every day? And that's really was all I wanted, was the opportunity to do it every day with a clean slate, that I could get up and write as long as I needed to write. And it took me also a very long time to find my own voice. Now, Eric, when I first read Eric's first play, when we met at the Chelsea Theater Center back in 1921. No, I mean, Eric's voice was distinct from the second that I mean, it was just brilliant. I spent a long time trying to find my voice, and so I knew I needed the time I needed someone to pay me to do it so that I could find it, if that makes any sense. And then when I found it, then I was like, oh, okay, this is what I sound like. And so, and then the rest of it became about, now I just want to cause as much trouble as possible, you know. Because that's the great thing about the positions we're in. We can sort of cause trouble. A lot of writers don't have that freedom. They don't have that freedom. They have to do the kind of, you know, I don't want to name any television shows, but the kind of shit shows that people do because they have a mortgage and they have kids and all that stuff. And I just think those of us who have gotten to a point where we can say, no, we want to do it because we need to change the world, as opposed to, when I say change the world, that sounds way too pretentious. I mean just change points of view about life, slightly. That if we're given that opportunity, then we have a moral obligation to do it, you know, and not just settle for, oh, I got to buy a bigger house or a nicer car or something.
Mm-hmm. Terry, what did you want out of becoming a writer?
Not to continue being a lawyer.
I
did everything in my power to not be a writer until I had no choice but to become a writer because I was terrified. I really just didn't have the balls to pursue it. It was my deep, dark secret. It sounded so ludicrous to me, you know, having grown up in Brooklyn in a fairly blue-collar environment. You know, the idea of being a writer was like, that could get your ass kicked, you know, very easily. And it just sounded like that's something other people do. And it wasn't until I was well into my 20s that I really started to think, okay, I'm just so miserable doing what I'm doing. And I thought I wanted to make a lot of money. I thought that was my ambition. And the only two jobs I knew that I thought did that were doctor and lawyer. So I became a lawyer. And then I just couldn't stand it. After 2 years, I finally just said to myself, what do you want to do when you wake up in the morning? And the answer, finally, you know, that I could say out loud was I want to write. And once I was able to just say it out loud, I just got on a plane and went to LA and dug in. But I did fight it for a really long time. And then, you know, I had exactly the same experience as Tom. I remember I got my first paycheck to write something, and it was like for $500. And I was living in an apartment in West Hollywood with two other guys sharing. It was two friends of mine, and we each had our own room, and I had a bathroom. And I said, if I could sustain this level of existence, this is at 30 years old as an attorney. It was, you know, I went from having a pretty high-powered job here. And I said, if I could have my own bedroom and my own bathroom and just share this apartment and live here for the rest of my life and do this, I'd sign up for this in a heartbeat. I don't care about any of it. And that was it. I said, if I could just do this every day, I'm good. And, you know, it got better than that as time went on. But it's just, that was compared to what I had been doing. And said, God, I can actually make a living and eat doing this. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Okay. What about you, Eric?
I always thought I was a writer since I was young, and the thing that tortured me was I need to find something else to do because this will never work out. So, but I could never figure out, I couldn't do anything else. Everything I thought of, I thought, I can't do that. I thought, I'd love to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. So fortunately, it worked out. And really, I was a starving playwright until Tom gave me my first TV job. So he ruined me for the theater, but I've been able to make a living, so that's good. It was a good trade-off.
I said to Eric, because I'll tell a very quick story. Eric's plays, as I said, are brilliant and very complex. The writing is very complex. And I knew how broke he was, and I wanted to give him a writing thing on St. Elsewhere. And I went, and I thought, if I give this play to Bruce Paltrow, he will throw it at me. It's so, I mean, Bruce was a smart guy, but he had no time to read a play, especially a really intricate play. So I just went in with one page, and I said, hey, Bruce, why don't you read this page? And he went, oh, that's pretty good. Hire this guy. And I went, and then I said to Eric, I called him and I said, I'm gonna ruin you for theater because I'm gonna tell you that you should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because his plays never had beginnings, middle, and end. They just existed in the universe. You really ought to read his plays.
No, you're sweet. But thank you for showing that page to Bruce. That was
It's
good.
been a hell
Did
of
you
a
rewrite
page.
it before you showed?
No. No.
Okay, so I've heard two prevailing opinions throughout those conversations concerning rewriting. Now, one which says I want to keep the individual voice throughout the show of each writer in the show, and the majority that says they have to rewrite in order to give the series a unique voice, so that it has the feeling that one person has written it and one person has directed it. Now, first of all, I mean, looking at something like True Detective, everybody talks about it. Everybody talks about whether this is like a turning point because there's one person who is writing it, one person who is directing it. Do you think this is going into, is this a new trend? I mean, how do you see that?
Well, I mean, if True Detective is a turning point, it's like the 400th turning point. We keep having turning points, so I don't know. I don't know if it is. How many episodes did they do?
There are 8.
8, yeah. I don't know. To me, I don't know. I think I like an orchestra. I just don't want to hear a tuba. I want to hear a whole orchestra. And I only play the tuba. So I need a violinist and I need a drummer.
So how much do you rewrite then? So, you know, when you get...
Well, as I think I said, what I say to the writer in the first draft is, this is the draft you teach me how to write my show. And the second draft is the draft where I'll teach you how to write my show. So that in between those two, you get really original stuff from the person who you've hired, but also you have to bring it back to the tapestry that is the series. The series is a tapestry that you have the job as showrunner of weaving it all together. And, you know, so that's my...
Yeah, but the number of episodes is a good point, because I mean, I think Robert Carlock in the book has calculated that if you need about 3 stories for each episode, you need like perhaps 70 stories in a year, which is an amazing amount of stories for one mind, right? Is that, do you think that this is...
Yeah, I mean, I like to split the difference. I like having other people because for that very reason, you hear, you know, other points of view, other stories that you can do on the show, but it should, in my opinion, be filtered through one voice. It should seem consistent. You shouldn't go tune in week to week and have your main character sounds completely, he's only speaking in Elizabethan English this week, and then you have different things. It should feel like the same show, although it should also be fresh enough that you're having, because I don't, you know, unless you're Rod Serling, I don't know how one writer can continue to surprise you every week in and week out. Eventually, you start to see, or you know, even if you're not paying attention, you start to see the wheels turning. You go, okay, yeah, that bag of tricks. You know, you start to see, and we all start to. I mean, even, you know, I've done this a million times where I had to have a writer's assistant go back and say, "Did I write this exact exchange of dialogue before? Can you please check?" Because, you know, even I'll read scripts I've written 10 years ago, and I'll read a setup for something, and I'll go, all right, this is what I would do today, and I'll turn to the page and I go, fuck, I did it 10 years ago. That's exactly where it went. And I don't even remember what I did, but I go, I really am a hack. But that's why it helps to have other people. You know, it really does.
So what is the difference between that big trauma of, you know, a screenwriter being rewritten by a director and a writer being rewritten by the showrunner?
Well, usually the showrunner, hopefully, is actually another writer. In the case of some directors, they think, you know, you're talking about the feature world, they think they're writers, or they just steamroll over the writing process, or there's just a lack of respect for the writing or a lack of understanding, I would say, is probably more the case, where, you know, it's I've always made the analogy, and I think I might have even said this to you, it's like sort of if you're going to build a house, and if the writer is the architect, and he draws a set of architectural plans and then turns them over to the builder, who is the director, it would be helpful if I was building a house and you said, hey, you know, the architect's available to be on the building site in case you want to start moving walls around. You go, that's all right. You know what? This support beam, what is this? We don't need this thing. Let's move that. You know, and then what you get is a house that, you know, doesn't stand up, or you have stairways that lead to nowhere. And, you know, it's a house, but it's really not the house that was designed. And you'd have a thoughtful builder would say, I'm thinking of moving this support beam. What is this doing here? You say, oh, actually, that actually holds up the entire third act of your movie. You shouldn't move that. And you go, oh, okay, great. Thank you for explaining that. And in the case of unthoughtful directors, they'll just, how many times have you read a script and you say, God, what a great script that was, and you go to see the movie, and you go, what the hell happened to this? And what happened is a director like that got a hold of it and just went ahead and made their own movie and without regard to...
Or an actor.
Or an actor, yeah, powerful
star.
actor decided, I can do this scene without, the other three people, I'll just do it with a look. I don't need all these words, And that happens, and again, the director will say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, let's do that. Sad but true.
Eric, would you like to add something to that? Is there for you a difference between being rewritten by
Oh,
a
well,
writer than being rewritten by a director?
I've had no feature experience, so I don't. I
Okay.
have been spared that trauma. As a showrunner, I would love it if my co-executive producer, senior writers would get the script to the finish line, with maybe just a few notes and a little polish from me. I resent it highly when I spend my weekend rewriting them, and they're off playing golf or something, making nearly as much money as I do. The thing about a long-running show is the characters develop a voice, the show develops a voice, and the actors who if you have good actors, and I hope you do, they contribute a lot to the formation of that character and that voice. So it's incumbent upon all the writers to learn what that is, to learn how to play that score. It's this composer's, it's this sound, it's these characters. So your good staff will get that pretty close to being done, and then you improve it where you can.
The thing that's the double-edged sword is that you can do what most television does, which is over-explain everything, and be more guaranteed that that's what you're going to see on the screen, that what you intended because you've over-explained it will actually show up. You can under-explain it, and then if you're not there, what you find is a lot of people going, well, I don't know, I think I know. Obviously we have meetings with directors to go through the scenes and all that stuff, but again, it doesn't come alive until you're on the stage, and so it's a real danger, finding the balance between putting it all in there and being incredibly subtle about it. It's tough.
Was it different for you, your experience with on the internet? I mean, you come from an international TV show, so it was a different kind of animal than what you usually do.
What I found was, and I have to be very careful because some of my, one of my directors and one of my actors from Borgia are here, so
Okay.
I have to say nice things. What I found is that, especially for the directors, they were so unused to having a writer around that for the first day or two, they were very like, well, what the hell is he doing here? And then within a very short amount of time, we developed a relationship where I think they understood that I was there to help, not to, be an asshole, though I could be an asshole. And what I've also found is that the writer in Europe tends to be, the television writer in Europe tends to be as disrespected as the movie writer is in America. I mean, in the sense of not included in the process in really any tangible way. You write the script and then it's thank you very much. So what I've been trying to do in the 3 years that I've been in Europe is to work with European writers to try to get them to understand what they can do, and to get the producers to understand that becomes a necessary thing.
I think the French writers love you a lot now. That's
Yeah,
what I'm hearing.
yeah. Well, one of the French writers that we found is an incredibly talented young woman, and she's just so now. I'm going to be calling her for a job very soon. So I mean, she's terrific, and I'm very proud of the fact that she's on her way. So, and that's all it took.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it took was just bring her into the American writers company and say, this is how we make television shows.
Great. So Eric, you have this new experience, democratic experience of, an Amazon pilot,
Oh, yeah. Yes.
where the audience decides whether it's
Well,
greenlit or not.
It's impossible to determine if that's the case.
Okay. You think that's what they say? But
Well, we just finished this pilot for Amazon based on Michael Connelly's Harry Bosch books, called Bosch, very imaginative title. And Amazon is streaming it now. You can go see it. You don't even have to be a member of Amazon Prime. And you can review it and you can rate it. And it has some bearing on their decision, whether they're going to make the series or not. But they're very secretive, and it's impossible. They just say, we have all kinds of data. And we're going to crunch the data for a few weeks, and then we'll let you know. So it's this very public, the studios do a traditional sort of testing thing where they go to Glendale and go to a retirement home, and a bunch of people, twirl the dials and go, I like this moment, I don't like this moment, I like this moment. They do that kind of testing, but this is a very public sort of, now if they don't pick up the series, then it's like, oh, well, you failed really publicly. Whereas failed pilots are never seen ordinarily. So it's odd. And they're very cagey about how much it does matter, it doesn't matter. So in the end, I think it probably comes down to if they like it, they'll do it. And now I did hear, they had some pilots a year ago. One of them was called Zombieland. It was based on the movie and the graphic novel.
A show about zombies?
Yeah,
That'll never work.
Who would have thought of that?
Who'd have thought? And in that case, I think the intensely negative reaction from the fans of the novel and the film killed that pilot.
Right.
So in that sense, we've had a very positive reaction. So we didn't get, from Michael's fans, they liked it. So that was good. But I think probably in the end, it's one guy in a room who decides. Like
but
always.
it's an algorithm. Perhaps it's not.
Well, he's got all the algorithms to work with. So.
I heard it was a monkey on roller skates.
Can we get that on YouTube? Can we look at that right now?
So here's my favorite quote from Eric. And Eric is very laconic, so it is very short.
Won't that be a lesson to you, Tom?
I asked him, where do you get time to live? And he answered, there was a writer's strike a few years ago.
Said that?
Yes. Now, this is not a normal job. And nobody pretends it is. It's more of a lifestyle. And I think David Mamet once said, doing a movie is like running a marathon. Doing a TV show is like running until you die. So,
That's about right.
Yeah.
and it's not difficult to see why he might have said that, or it's like you're constantly working on several episodes. One is being shot, several are being developed, and there's lead time is always it gets shorter and shorter. One gets more tired, and as the show goes on. So the question is, I guess, is pressure good? Is it what makes for such good writing?
In my case, it makes for any writing. Until I have something breathing down my neck, I can't really focus. I love deadlines, and I will, over the course of my career, I never wrote a term paper in high school that wasn't due the next morning, and I don't think I've ever written a script that wasn't due 2 weeks earlier. But responsibly, never prepping. Maybe once or twice we prepped off an outline for a day and then we've had a script. But that feeling of, okay, there's nothing else to think about except the script is what finally allows me to start focusing and writing. And I just need to build up enough of that, because otherwise I should say during that whole process, you are still thinking about the script, but you're thinking about, I could do this, I could do that, I could do 9 different things. But it's not until the gun is to your head and you go, okay, make a decision, and then you go, okay, this is what it is, and I just need that.
Mm-hmm. I'm the complete opposite.
Wow,
Complete
I
opposite.
dream about being the complete opposite. Sounds great.
I get up every morning and I start writing. I'm writing as I get out of bed in my head, get up to the writing room. To me, it's if I don't write in a day, it's the worst day of my life, and I don't know why I'm alive if I don't write that day. It really is it's an obsessive thing where it's my form of meditation, it's my form of worship, it's my
How many hours a day do you write?
Well, it depends if I have to be on the set or not, but I can write, a couple hours, or I get up at 5.
Right.
So I can still write a couple of hours before I have to be anywhere.
I get up at 5 too.
You told
to
me
pee,
a story.
and then I go back to Then I get up around 10. And
I always say that I have to get up at 5 because the muse goes to David Chase's house at 6:30, and she'd much rather be at David Chase's house than my house.
You told me a story once that you put a pad by your bed, so in case you woke up in the middle of the night, you could write it down, and it would be there. And you came in, this must have been on Homicide.
Yeah.
And you came in and you said, okay, I wrote something down last night, and then I looked at it, I got up in the morning, I looked at it, and I'd written down, boy meets girl.
I thought I had written the
felt like
most
a great
elaborate
idea.
outline. I had nuances. Yeah. That's the last day I ever had a pad near my bed.
How many hours a day do you write?
Oh, I'm somewhere in the middle, I think. Some days I don't write at all. And I feel sort of crappy if I don't write, but
You think about writing all the time, probably, right?
no.
That's got to I'm trying to help you out here.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's sort of, I always thought it was kind of a chemical thing. It's like the dread of writing, the dread of not writing. When the dread of not writing gets higher, then you start to write. So.
Actually, I have one more quote from Eric, equally laconic. And we were talking about how difficult it is to get in as a writer, to get your first break into the business.
Yeah.
And of course, I have, wonderful stories from all three of you, and they're very long, so I'm not gonna, in the book. And you said it's like musical chairs, where the chairs get fewer as the rooms get smaller, and they keep sending people in.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's, also us here, the film programs that keep sending people in.
Yeah.
And it's, if I were to ask each one of you, for one thing today in a room partly full of writing students, one thing, one piece of advice, what would that be?
I don't know.
I think the quote I gave was already what I would say. That you have to be faithful to yourself and to the truth as you know it, and that's the only advice that I can think of. Yeah.
I mean, aside from having the talent, you've got to approach this. I mean, you have to put the level of commitment it takes to get hired on a television show or get a movie or just get to a point where someone reads your script I always make the analogy, it's the same as saying I want to play professional sports. There are that many people who want to do it. Everybody who's ever thrown a baseball thinks they can be on the Yankees, and most people can write, and everybody thinks they can write a script, and many people do, and those are the same people you're competing with in addition to the talented ones. But you've got to commit yourself to this as if it's like, all right, this is what it's going to take to get to play on a professional team, and it's going to take years of digging in. And no one ever rang my doorbell and asked to read a script I wrote, ever. You got to get it out there, and if that means getting an agent, and that's another whole other challenge. But you just got to completely dedicate yourself to this. I made a deal with myself early on that I would not go to bed at night until I did something that day to further my writing career, whether it was writing a scene, calling an agent, sending a script out, doing something. And if I was in bed and I didn't do it, I'd get my ass out of bed and do it so I could say, okay, I'm this much closer to making this happen, because it's so easy to not write and just go, oh, tomorrow, or everybody's going out to the Dodger game, I'll do that, and it's just, I mean, I was lucky enough to have felt more pressure because I didn't start writing until I was in my very late 20s, so I felt like I had wasted so many years, denying what I really wanted to do, so I really, really kicked it into overdrive once I committed to it. But I don't think there's any other way to do it. And then, of course, you hear stories about a guy, yeah, I wrote a script, an agent read it, I got hired on a show. You're like,
Yeah.
how does it happen? It never happens. And I've actually met a couple of people, but probably you're not going to be one of them. You're probably going to have to dig in and work hard and write a ton of scripts before anybody notices.
Eric?
I got started so long ago, I wouldn't presume. I have no idea. I have no idea how people find an agent these days. I really don't.
It's
And
really
the
it's a
business has
miracle that
changed so
anything
much.
ever happens.
Yeah.
I look back and think, I don't know how lucky we were
Yeah.
to even have the break. And it usually is. I mean, it is a break, or it's just a lucky thing. Or I can't tell you how many times, oh, gee, we loved your script. We just hired a guy. We would have hired you. And you have these near misses, and you just think it's never going to happen for you. There were many points along the way where I could have said, and a reasonable person might have said, I can't do this anymore. I got to go back to making a real living. And that's the sure way that it'll never happen, of course, is just to quit and stop trying.
I do think the one advantage that people starting now have is that there are so many more venues. I mean, when I started
Yeah.
television, there were 3 networks. Fox hadn't even come into being yet. Now, there's just endless amount of venues, but also you have the capacity to shoot something yourself, write
Yeah.
something, shoot something, put it on and put it on the internet, and it potentially will get seen. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing. And I would take advantage of that. Just to
absolutely.
flex,
That
just to
monkey
keep
on
the
roller
mon-
skates might be your script, and there are people in writers' rooms watching it.
Yeah.
There are people who've gotten deals off of short films they put on YouTube. I mean, absolutely. So, and the great thing about, the writing, it's the blank page is the great equalizer. I mean, if it's there, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, how old you are, what color you are. It's all, I don't think any producer in Hollywood cares where a great idea or a great script comes from, and it's unlike anything else. I mean, you can do it remotely, you can do it from, Mars if that were possible. But it's not like being an actor where you have to show up and get rejected in person. You can get rejected by thousands of people simultaneously. so cheer up.
Okay, so I have one final question before we move on to the Q&A. I once sat in a class with Bill Goldman here at Columbia, and he said, to my great surprise, him being Bill Goldman and all, I don't like my writing. I never like my writing. So
I don't like his writing either. No, that's not true. That's not true.
do you like your writing?
I don't like my writing.
I like your writing.
Well, I like your writing, but I don't like my writing. No, I think it's a very. I think when you're satisfied, then you're in trouble. I think you have to constantly be. There's so many people who will give you an opinion, both positively and negatively, that if you only listen to them, you will not know anything. But if you can listen to yourself and your own heart and a few trusted friends, then I think you'll be all right. But I tend to hate everything the minute it comes, and I write longhand, so everything comes out of the pen, I hate it. I hate it when I read it, and then I go through a slight period of thinking maybe it's okay, and then I despise it again, and then I'm very grateful they're going to shoot it, because then I don't have to think about it till I get to the set.
You have to cultivate a sense of what you're doing that's accurate. You get so much input from so many places, and most of it, frankly, is worthless, because most of it is, well, if I had written this scene, I would have done it this way. And that's not helpful. What's helpful is I see what you're trying to do, and maybe this would help you do it a little better. That's the only kind of input that's helpful. So you have to cultivate a sense of yourself, and that means being critical. As you were saying that, I was thinking of this novelist friend of mine who can't stop talking about how wonderful his novel is when he's writing it. And it just rings so wrong to me. He should be saying, I don't know, it's not going very well. He's always going, it's fantastic, it's the best thing I've ever done.
Oh, I bet it's not.
Well, I bet it's not either. Anyway, so I think what Goldman is saying, Tom, and I feel the same way, is you want to be skeptical about what you're doing and be open to the idea that it might not be finished and it maybe could get better.
Yeah, I mean, I have liked things I've written on occasion, but for the most part, it's like the problem is you like them until you hit send, and then as soon as it's out in the world, you reread it. And go, oh, God, what was I thinking? Yeah, I mean, it depends. Or you like it until a better writer than you reads it and starts talking about it, and then you feel like God, you're absolutely right. Why didn't I see that? Or it's hard. I mean, it's I don't know what else to compare it to. You go to a wedding and you dance and you think you were doing all right, and then you watch the video. Holy shit, is that what I look like? Something like that, I guess. But but there have been moments where sometimes you write something that's not that good, and it comes out of the mouth of somebody like Jim Gandolfini, and you go, wow, I'm a fucking great writer. Yeah, when he says it, it's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it depends.
Good, thank you. So let's open for questions from the floor, and I'll just point at, there's mics coming in, so.
Hi, could you talk a little bit about what actors have brought to your characters, both through delivering the words, but beyond that in ways that might happen?
Well, in my experience, and I've now done a bunch of shows that were long running. What I find remarkable is the process of when you start a show, as the writer, I know everything about the character and the actor knows nothing. And over a relatively short amount of time, depending on the actor, they know everything about the character and I know nothing. So I think that's a fabulous process in the sense of it, because it means they're taking true ownership of the role. And you don't have to carry all of the characters yourself. You have people helping you to carry them. So I think it's great the contribution that actors and directors make in terms of defining the show and the characters on the show.
What does that mean for the latter scripts? How are you writing those scripts different?
Well, because you start to hear the actor. When you conceive something, you don't know who's going to play that part. And then once you get that rhythm in your head, it becomes relatively easy. I mean, with Buscemi,
sure.
You didn't think of Buscemi for that part.
No.
But
not when I wrote
now
it.
Who could have played
Well, then
it?
you feel like, oh, I've just been introduced to Nucky. I know who he is now. Or then you'll see that character with another character, and you go, oh, these guys don't like each other. Oh, I didn't realize look at the two of them together. You can see it coming up. And then you start writing toward that. Yeah. Or, God, these guys are so funny together. And then you start to develop relationships there. But very often you feel like you're being introduced to your own characters by the actor. And it's great.
Hi, I'm Leon. I'm one of those writing students from Columbia. So my question is about, specifically about like Boardwalk and the Borgia. You guys are writing about things that have a place in history, so they exist. And I'm wondering about what the specific challenges and strategies that you guys have for working in that specific kind of genre are, because it feels like when I watch something like Boardwalk Empire, like we're driving somewhere. What I love about it is it feels like we're going somewhere. I'm not really sure where we're going, but we're going somewhere, and I like the ride. And I know that there's also like sort of, I guess, an obligation towards history and figuring out how to navigate that.
No, you.
One of the big challenges is that the audience is ahead of the story because of the historical characters. I mean, for me, I remember watching Deadwood, and once I realized that was based on real people, the first thing I did was run to my computer and Google every character, and then I was way ahead of everybody. I knew, for example, Al Swearingen didn't die until the 20th century. So every time Al Swearingen got into a jam on Deadwood, I went, well, he's not going to die. And I thought, I shouldn't know this. and it kind of took away a little of it for me. So, so then, of course, I go and do a show with Al Capone and people that and they're not going to die. So it's never good to be the guy standing next to Al Capone in a tense situation. So that's a challenge. So, the idea is then to, just try to be surprising while still being true to the history and true to the spirit of who these people were. We've taken some artistic license with history, but not a lot. Generally plays out the way it played out in real life, but if it's true to the spirit of who these characters were, that's fine. And it's really a good example is Al Capone. He did spend a lot of time in Atlantic City as a young man. So I thought, all right, well, fictionally, I've now earned the right that he might have had a relationship with a guy, my fictional Jimmy Darmody. He might have known a guy like that, and they might have had a friendship. And as it turns out, Jimmy Darmody is a footnote in history, somebody you never read about. Of course, because he didn't exist, but Al Capone did. But that relationship was valid to me, and I felt like I can do that. That's okay. I would not have Al Capone go to France, for example, and spend the summer there, because that never happened. So that would be, although that would have been a great episode.
But a nice trip,
Ooh la
too.
la,
Yeah.
yes, Mr. Capone. Right itself. And how do you...
Well, I mean, it's the same sort of thing. The good thing about Borgia is that it's so much longer ago that there's a lot of holes in the facts.
Right.
So I found my job was to try to, like a good reporter, verify with two sources a fact, and then fill in the blank until the next fact.
Right.
But I felt in between I had all the freedom in the world to do whatever I wanted.
Right.
With the characters.
Hi. I see three models. You have a show like Sherlock, which has 3 main episodes to the series. Then you have a show like House of Cards, which has a lot of episodes. And then you have like your typical Walking Dead season. In those 3 different types of shows, is the creative process different because of the number of episodes that are shown per season or series to tell the story? And what's the creative process like for that?
There are times on shows I've been on that, if you have an order of 12 episodes, you think you get to episode 10 and you think we can't possibly do 12. And then if you're on a network show and they say you got to do 24, somehow you do 24. You figure it out. I mean, it's sort of part of the job. Is to just sort of fill up that real estate, with stories. And I had written, it was maybe the longest year of my television career, on the New Adventures of Flipper. And as it turns out, there are only about 9 or 10 stories that organically involve a dolphin. And we had an order of 22. And when you get to the 9th dolphin story, and then you start looking at each other and go, we have to do 13 more of these. And that's what separates the men from the boys. You go, okay, we're going to figure this out. And that show ran for like 3 years, and they did 60 some odd episodes of that. So you just do your job. I mean, I think that's pretty much it.
Well, the only thing that might be different is that when you have, like, we would do 8 episodes of Oz a year, and so it allowed me to have a very clear sense of what the overall story for the entire season was, and what the driving sort of theme and energy of the season was. But when we were doing Homicide, we were just praying that somebody else would get murdered so we could steal that from the newspaper.
Can I geek out for a second? Oz was fucking terrific.
Oh, thank you.
Oz was, yeah. I mean, the first show I ever saw that made me like get out of my chair and go, oh my God, I mean, every week. Just unbelievable, just amazing. I mean, and
That was a turning point.
And it was a turning point. Yeah, it was, and I think it's under the radar, way more under the radar than it should be as a turning point.
Very, very sweet.
Well,
I went.
have it on the syllabus.
I went to visit Tom in his offices in Chelsea while he was in the middle of doing Oz, and it was right before Easter, and I bought a couple hot cross buns downstairs and brought them up to him, in celebration, and he said, "Oh yeah, this is great. We're crucifying somebody on the show next week." And he was so happy.
We did that on Flipper, actually. So it's been done.
It's all been done.
That tuna fish episode was amazing.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. We're there. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for sharing your insight with us tonight. I'm curious whether any of you have ever felt the urge to step in the director's shoes in order to exert some greater creative control, and if not, how do you conceive of your scope of work?
The thing about television is the writer-producer is really the creative auteur, if you will, unlike features where it's the director. Directors on series are usually guests. Sometimes they're frequent guests. Occasionally they're like Tim Van Patten on Boardwalk Empire, who's a resident director and sets the tone. And so he's part of setting the tone. But unlike features, it's the writer-producer is the main, the showrunner is the main creative person. So you don't really need to direct. In fact, you'd have to talk to actors if you did that. So.
Well, what I find is it allows me to appear to be incredibly generous, because I'll say to the directors and the actors, no, you take it, you run with it, you find it, you do it. But I know I'm going to get it back. I'll get it back in editing. So I can be incredibly sweet about it, but knowing that it's all going to come back to me ultimately. So.
I directed one episode of The Sopranos, and it was great. It was a great experience, but I had the luxury of working with such great directors, first and foremost Tim Van Patten, and I thought, unless you have a burning passion to do this, why would I not let Tim or Alan Coulter or Alan Taylor direct? I mean, just to say I directed, and I don't have a burning passion to do it. I'd much rather write. So it was a great experiment, and I'll probably do it again at some point. But as long as I'm surrounded by guys like that, no contest.
Mm-hmm.
Follow up just to the editing process. Could you talk a little bit about your editing process and your involvement during the editing?
Yes. I mean, with us, the editor does an assemblage, then works with the director for a really shamefully short amount of time, and then I look at the director's cut, and then I sit in with the editor, and we do a cut to show the network, and then we get their thoughts, and then we do another cut, and then we lock it. So that's the process, the way we do it.
It's my favorite part of the process. That's where the show really comes together, and it's amazing how much you can turn things around. You've seen things, rough cuts in assemblies where you go, oh my God, this is such a mess, and then it turns out to be sometimes your best episode. And it's amazing. It's really the magic of what we do. You just put two pieces of footage back to back, and suddenly it's in a different way, and it changes everything. And it's really magic. It's really fun.
So it's you guys who have final cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
With input from the network.
Yeah, I mean, HBO has been terrific. I mean, generally, they've never, ever told us to change anything, or they have questions, and we have conversations, but there's never been a mandate, you can't do this, or you can't do that.
Okay. Oh.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Lauren. I'm a student of dramaturgy here at Columbia, so I spend a lot of time, I think, advocating for things to be added to scripts. Although my favorite thing about TV shows lately is their willingness to sort of kill characters that I think are super important. So I won't spoil anything that I've been binge watching lately, but I will say that I was watching a video of a character who said there are millions of books that teach you how to develop a character, but not many that teach you how to let go of a character. So I'm wondering what your process is in sort of deciding who lives or dies, or how to go about chopping somebody's head off for the sake of the story. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about sort of sloughing off dead folks here and there, to sort of get at something that might be driving a story. Like, how do you go about making those decisions?
Well, I learned from Tom Fontana that sometimes it's the actor who determines that.
Yeah, I've had actors practically begging me to kill them, even though they haven't used those words. For me, it starts with the truth, of what the story is, and we had a situation on our show where we had a very beloved character who, at the end of the second season, it became very clear that if my main character Nucky didn't kill this guy, I would call bullshit. I'd say this is a television show. This guy, everything he did, the story has led you to this point. If this guy is a gangster, that other guy has to die. And I don't care what his Q rating is or how great he is or how many fan letters he gets. This will not be real, and I feel like we're doing a TV show, and we are doing a TV show, but you want to be surprising. You want to keep it as real as possible. So those are the decisions, and that's again not stumping for HBO here, but I thought this is going to be a tough conversation because I really felt strongly creatively about it, and I said I made a really big decision for the show, and I think we need to kill this character. And they said, God, that's an unbelievable moment. That's going to be such a great moment for Nucky, and no one's going to ever in a million years see that coming. If that were a network show, they would have said, wow, that's a great idea. I would have gotten fired, and the actor would have been on for, I'm not kidding, right? I mean, they would have gotten rid of me and kept him for 5 more years. Yeah. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about violence. You mentioned Flipper and some of these other shows you've worked on, or even just coming from something like St. Elsewhere, and then now, Oz or the Borgias, just how you feel the limits have changed. What has that done to your storytelling?
I'll let you take this.
All right. Thank you. When going from network television to do Oz on HBO, given it was the first drama series, and Chris Albrecht said, I trust you, to do it well or whatever. I suddenly felt this overwhelming sense of responsibility to all the future people who went in to pitch series to HBO, in the sense of that, on one hand, coming off of network television, I felt totally like a kid in a candy store, like, oh my God, I can do anything, this is so great. And then the minute I sort of got over that, I went, oh no, wait, when it comes to violence, it really has to be a part of the storytelling, in the sense of that you're telling the story about a building filled with men who have committed an extreme act, and at least once in their life, and are now in the same building together, and what happens as a result of that. And so the violence that we did on Oz was specifically motivated by the character's need, in the same way you're describing the character you killed. There gets to be a point where an act of violence is the only option this particular character may have. The other element is, if you're going to say to an audience, this is the world I'm asking you to participate in, then you can't pull the punch. You have to really hit. And there are a lot of people who, I'll tell a very quick story. Very good friends of mine, a husband and wife, would watch the show. They'd get in bed and they would watch the show. The lights would be off and they'd turn on the TV and the show would go on, and the wife would say, oh, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. And the husband would turn the remote, and they'd sit in the dark for a minute, and then she'd go, okay, turn it back on. And I said, well, Nancy, as long as you said turn it back on, I'm okay with that. But I think that, my point is, I think that's an honest reaction to violence, and I'm glad that she was repulsed by it, because I think it allowed her to go to that place and terrify her the way it would if you were a guy in a prison. Clearly they don't agree.
Hi, I'm not a film student, so sorry if my question's not filmy. But my question's for Tom about Oz. I'm glad you guys have been brought it up, because it's definitely my favorite show because of its ability to just like evoke like a really powerful feeling in a way that no other show has. Like just the horror or disgust or anxiety I've felt for various characters has just been really like crazy. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the writing process, like if you did like research into, you know, the roles or something, because I know a lot of writers bring stories from their personal lives, but a lot of the stories on Oz are so extreme. I just wonder how you come up with such amazing stories.
First of all, I grew up in an Italian neighborhood, so a lot of guys I knew went on vacation, as you would say. The other thing was I did about 2 years of research going in and out of prisons all over the country. And what I discovered was, it was the only time I've ever done research where I didn't take a piece of paper and a pencil with me. Because, first of all, I wanted the impressions of what I was getting to stay with me as opposed to, you know, oh, this or that specific. The other thing was I was truly terrified that if I wrote something down as I was meeting with one of these prisoners, they would then, years later, come to me and say, you told my story, I'm going to kill you. So I figured if I just didn't write anything down, they would think maybe I didn't write it down. Anyway. But I did do a lot of research, and it was terrifying because even though I was going in as a guest and knew I was going to get out, the sound of the cells locking and just the ambiance of the place was so terrifying that I really took that to heart, and that's when I realized I really could write the show. Now, you can imagine at 5 o'clock in the morning what it is like to be writing those kinds of scenes. Anyway, the thing about Oz, unlike almost all the other series I've ever done, is it was the one that would stay with me the longest. Like, we would finish a season, and it would keep yelling at me. It would keep saying, no, you come back here. And that's the reason that I decided to stop doing it, because I was like, I just have to get away from this thing. You know what I mean? I have to get away from it because it just won't shut up. Anyway, so.
Have you ever thought about doing like a Christmas special or something? You know, get the reunion, all the guys get back together.
We used to joke about Oz Goes Hawaiian, you know, but that was just to get the cheap trip out of HBO.
Yeah, that's the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my God. Perhaps. Yeah. There. Just choose one.
Hi. My name is Charisma. I'm a first year here. I had a question, all three of you, about character development. As a writer, I know like you have a character in mind and you know what type of person he or she is. And I wanted to know, like, how do you pace like character development in each episode? Like how much or how little do you put in to you reveal about a character each episode?
That's a great question. You know, bad TV explains everything all at once. You know, you find out everything about the character's backstory in the pilot.
And Bed Network Notes will ask you to do exactly that.
Explain.
Where did he come from?
Yeah.
And you say, well, tune in next week.
Yeah, Don't you want to see what happens next? No, we don't.
Yeah.
we want to know everything now.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, and I think you just kind of feel your way through. But the longer you can hold something back, the better. You want some mystery so that.
Yeah, I love thinking about it like when it's done well. I think it's like eavesdropping on a conversation. People drop little bits of information about themselves or refer to something that happened, and little by little you start piecing it together as the weeks go by, and then you realize, oh my God, this is what they've been talking about, and it's for me at least, the best of it is always like trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together yourself and not give away too much.
Okay, let's go to the left. Yeah, here.
Hi, my name is Marquise Smalls, and I'm a writer. And just sitting here listening to you guys, it's inspiring, and thank you so much. I'm curious to find out your best advice for all three of you. If you want to break in as a writer, do you suggest writing a spec for the show you love or an original and presenting that? And then also, is it possible to actually do that in New York City, or must you move to LA? And basically, when you are looking to staff for new writers, what is the main thing you're looking for to join your team?
I would say I would definitely be interested in seeing something original because I want to know who you are. I mean, mimicry is part of the TV business, but whether or not you can write a convincing, episode of any particular show is much less interesting to me than who you are and what your voice is. And that could be a short story or a play or, pretty much anything. It's great if it's a script. LA, it's easier. You can cast a wider net, I guess. And part of the business initially seems to be making, building relationships with people. When I started out in LA, and a lot of it was, hey, we got you a meeting with an executive over at Warner Brothers. Nothing's available now, but we just want they want to put a face to a name. So in the future, this person, and they can, So it helped being there. Like, can you jump in your car and run over somewhere and just say hello to this person, have coffee? And then, what was the third part of your question?
Just what are some of the things that you look for?
Yeah, the same thing. An original voice, an original take on the world, and a willingness to open up.
What he said. The only other little thing I would add, which is a very practical note, is because I do think you have to spend some time in LA. You don't have to move there, but you have to establish a beachhead there. And my advice would be don't try to get in touch with, you should try, but you won't succeed, with the big agents and the producers and all that stuff. What you should do is go to parties and bars and meet the assistants.
Absolutely.
Because it's all about knowing the assistants.
The assistants will one day, they're working on agents' desks learning how to be agents.
Yeah.
And that's their training. So they're always looking for,
And I know in my office, because I don't pay attention to anything, but the people I work with who are all, young and coming up, they'll go, oh, you have to watch this, you have to read this, they're much more listening to the world of what's coming up than I am. I'm just trying to maintain what I know right now. So that's my practical advice, is become very friendly with every assistant in Los Angeles you could possibly meet.
Do you have any insight in the writing room for video games or the video game industry?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, do you have any insight for the writing room of video games?
Oh, I wrote one video game 10 years ago. It was the worst experience of my life. I had never played a video game, and I had to get an 8-year-old to show me how to work Grand Theft Auto. I'm not even kidding. I swear to God. And it was just really hard for me to write. It was the type of game it was, and I don't know enough about video games to maybe there are some that are much more elaborate, but this was just a series of incidents a series of encounters between two people that ended in bloodshed at every step along the way. And then you got to the next level, and it was just a series of arguments that are like, yeah, looking at me, yeah, bang, 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 and then do the next one. So that's my video game.
I've never done a video game, but they did want to do one of Oz. And I said, oh, well, I'd never seen one. I didn't know what they were talking about. But I said, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. But if it has to be like the show, in the sense of that if somebody dies, there has to be a genuine reason, and there has to be a reflection of what the person who killed, what they've gone through to do that. And they looked at me like, no. And that's why the Oz video game does not exist to this day.
Okay, one more. So. Yes, there.
Hi. You mentioned that when you first read Eric's work, you were struck by how distinct his voice was, and then you said at a certain point you discovered your own voice. Mm-hmm. And I want to know, for someone who gets up every morning at 5, when that moment was when you said, I'm a writer, I can do this, I have, what was your voice? When did you discover your voice, essentially?
When did I discover my, man, now I'm going to have to actually think about, can I get back to you on that? You know what, I don't think it actually was like boing, I've discovered my voice. I think it came slowly over time, but I just remember the process was a long process, but I can't think of the moment that I went like, oh, I have to think about it. I'm an old man, I don't remember things.
That's always the excuse.